everyone, Cadaver Kelly here, and in this video I'm going to customize this blazer. I originally got this to be a work jacket, but the sleeves aren't long enough to cover my tattoos, so I have decided to DIY it and turn it into a weekend piece instead. I have some supplies over here, some patches. I'm going to put patches on the back, not sure which ones I'm going to use yet, so I just pulled out my full stack. And I generally do patches on the back of jackets and vests to keep it flat, that way it's not uncomfortable when I lean back, and then I just do the studs, button spikes on the front. So I have scissors and a needle and thread to sew those on, pins to pin them in place before I sew them. I have a hole puncher to use for these screw-on spikes, and of course a screwdriver to tighten them. I have my handy 2-prong pyramid studs and my collection of metal buttons, badges. So first things first, I need to decide placement of patches. This is a large area to cover with patches, the back of this blazer. I have laid it with the back flat on the table. I folded the front of the jacket so it's not underneath, because when I pin these patches to the back to sew them on, I don't want to accidentally pin in the front. I don't want to sew the back of the blazer to the front. That would not be good. So since this is so much area to cover, I think I'm going to start with my largest patches. So I have Susie and the Banshees. I'm going to put that somewhere rather visible. The nice thing about this blazer is it has seams, so I can see where the back separates from the front of the blazer, and that's as far as I want to go with the patches. I have Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Actually, I have this giant Joy Division Love Will Tear Us Apart patch, so I think I'm going to place that one first. I think on the back I might just do these 3 patches. These patches do cover quite a bit of space, and maybe I can even put a few patches on the front, a few of the smaller patches. So I'll show you. I've got Joy Division up here, Nick Cave down here, and Susie right here. So now that I have these patches kind of laid out where I want them, I'm going to take my straight pins and pin them in place. I would not recommend just trying to hold them down and sew them. I've done that in the past, and I've sewed patches all wonky, and I've sewn them where they're not laid down flat and get moved around, and then I sew them on wrong and have to use a seam ripper to take them off. So I would highly recommend using straight pins to pin down patches before sewing them. When putting pins into patches like this, or using straight pins in general, do it slowly and be careful. It's really easy to poke yourself with these things. Okay, so that did not take long. I just put a few pins in place just to get them secure so they'll kind of stay in place while I am sewing around the 3 patches. Next is actually hand sewing the patches on. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to give a tutorial on hand sewing. I did give one in a video DIY video I did for a battle vest, so I'll link that video in the description. But fair warning, my method of hand sewing is not very sophisticated. It gets the job done, but I'm sure there's probably better hand sewing tutorials on YouTube than what I can show you, because I'm not an expert at sewing by any means. So I am going to sew these patches on. Those back patches are sewn on. Here's what it looks like. Now I'm going to move on to the front of the blazer. So I decided I'm going to put a few small patches on the front of the blazer. Got a She Passed Away patch, Gang of Four, so I guess this is going to be a goth and post-punk blazer. Rosetta Stone and Virgin Prunes. And then once I pin and sew those, I'm going to move on to buttons, studs, spikes. Those are now pinned down, and I am going to sew them on. Okay, so the patches on the front are now sewn on, and I have added some buttons to the sides. We've got Neon Zegan, Bauhaus, Bikini Kill. This has now turned into a goth, post-punk, and punk blazer. Sisters of Mercy, Clan of Zymox, Ich Mal Deutschland. Then over here we have Misfits, The Cure, Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures button, Dead Kennedys, and a Nick Cave button. So now I am going to add studs and spikes to the lapels, and since this is a slim lapel, I think I'm just going to do one line of studs and spikes on each one, alternating between the two. Alright, so I have my hole puncher, screwdriver, and spikes. So I'm starting with the spikes. What I'm going to do is set my hole puncher to the smallest punch setting. I only need a small hole for these screw-on spikes. And to try and space it out evenly, I think I'm going to put one roughly in the middle, and then put a spike on each end of the lapel and kind of work my way in. So I'm getting right in the center of the lapel here and punching a hole. I have used these screw-on spikes in the past. Just push the screw into the hole, back of the screw on the back of the lapel, the screw poking up through it. Take the actual spike top and twist it on. And I'll twist it as tight as I can get it with my fingers, and then I'll use the screwdriver to tighten it a bit more. These particular spikes require a Phillips screwdriver. What I do is I hold the spike side of it, and then I use the screwdriver on the back to tighten it. So first spike down. All right, so now I have one spike towards the top, one towards the bottom, and one in the middle. I'm going to put one in the center here and here, and probably fill one more in between those as well. And I'm not measuring these out specifically, but this is kind of my strategy for spacing them out semi-evenly without having to pull out a ruler or measuring tape. Now here's what it looks like with one filled in between the initial 3 I put on. I'm going to put one more spike in between each gap here. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other lapel. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with how the spacing turned out on these for not having measured it out. And what I'm going to do now is put some pyramid studs in between the spikes. Alright, so now I am taking some pyramid studs and I'm putting them between the spikes on the lapel. I've used these in previous DIY videos. They have 2 prongs on the back. Some pyramid studs are 4 prong, which are probably more secure but take longer to put on. You just press it through the fabric until the prongs come out on the other side. Like this. And then you bend the prongs all the way down so they're pointed inward towards the inside of the spike. You want to make sure they're all the way in to keep them secure. And that's all there is to it. For the spikes that have a little more space, like these, I'm probably going to put 2 studs. And I am going to do that all along both lapels. That's how the studs and spikes turned out. And there is the full front of the jacket. Now I'm going to try it on.